Hi everybody. I've tried to make the audio better for today, but I can hear my fan sort of fighting all of this software a little bit, so apologies if your audio isn't the best. It's difficult to acquire tools to do online broadcasting right now because everybody is doing it because of this situation. And I should get an external mic tomorrow, and then next week my audio ought to be way better. Hopefully most of everything that you need is going to appear on the screen in front of you, so if the audio is not the best, hopefully you still are able to see what I'm doing to work through the lab. If you did this lab in advance, I created a unit test for it. It's not perfect, but it does give you an additional option to check your code for correctness. Anyway, so this will be my last broadcast for our first full week of online classes, so I hope that we will settle into ways that make you as successful as you can possibly be. But we'll just keep making adjustments as we need to, and we will do our best. So I'm going to get into the lab. Okay, so the point of this lab is to give you a chance to practice writing loops to solve some simple problems. They're less simple than they might appear at first glance until you've been programming for a while. There are some if statements here, and there are some uses of arithmetic that you've practiced earlier in the semester. So there's a few of those kinds of things. Now, there's 3 functions to implement. And I'm going to implement the 3 functions using 3 different looping setups. And what I'm going to do is I'll start with print evens, and I'm going to do that one as a okay approach. Anything that works and solves the problem is okay. But what I'm going to argue is that the loop that I use to solve print evens is less commonly, it's a less common approach than I'm going to use to solve the print odds, where I'm going to use a slightly better setup on the loop. And by better and worse, I mostly mean what most programmers would do once they've got a little bit of experience, and what most programmers would expect to see when you're writing a loop to solve these kinds of problems. So by the time we get to the FizzBuzz problem, which is a thing, if you haven't looked it up, you can Google FizzBuzz. It's kind of an urban legend among programmers. But the FizzBuzz problem, I will use what I think most programmers would agree is the best looping setup for solving this kind of a problem. At the end of the day, though, you can see 3 different looping setups. They're all going to solve the problems that they are trying to solve. And when you're writing your own code, go with what works for you. Eventually you'll get more comfortable to try other setups, but your first problem, of course, is just to make the program does what it's supposed to do. Okay, so print evens. What it is supposed to do is print all the even numbers from 1 up to some given maximum. You don't know what the maximum is, so you're going to have to write a loop that accounts for any possible maximum, including 1, by the way. So what I'm going to do to solve this problem is I'm going to set up a counter and start it at 1. And the reason why the counter starts at 1 is because the problem tells me that I'm supposed to start a counter at 1 and go up to max. So I'm going to use this unconditional loop, a loop that's written to run without any conditions. If you remember from Tuesday, if you watched me broadcast or you watched the video, When you write a loop with no conditions, then inside the loop you have to manually break it. Okay, so I'm going to start with the counter. Even numbers are simply numbers that evenly divide by 2, and that's easy because if you use the mod operator by 2 and that returns 0, that's evenly divisible by 2, and that's what an even number is. So I'm going to use the counter for this, and I'm going to say if the counter as it counts up, so every number as I count up from 1 to a maximum, if the counter is evenly divisible by 2, then I'm going to print out the counter. Now notice I'm inside the loop here, so I'm going to repeat that process. Separately from that, I'm going to check and see if the counter has reached the maximum. Because if the counter has reached the maximum, then I don't want to do any more work. I want to manually break the loop. So once the counter reaches the maximum, I'm going to break out of this loop, and I will be done. The last thing I'm going to do in the loop is count up the counter by 1, increment the counter. So that first bit is to check if the number's even and print if needed. Check if we're done yet, and then increment the counter. That's the whole problem, except for what? Oh, I forgot to tell it what to print. The counter, please. So that's that. We do have a test here, but I'm also going to go down to main and call that function. And I have to give it my desired maximum in here. I'm just going to say, let's say 25 as a desired maximum. So that will cause the function to loop from 1 to 25, printing out the even numbers, which should be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, and 24. Let's try it out. So I'm going to go run lab9.go. And I get the even numbers between 1 and 25. So that loop works, and that makes it okay because it solves the problem, but this manually breaking the loop, if you can avoid that, at least in my opinion, it's less likely you're going to have mistakes around that if you just don't have to do that at all. So let's go on to the print odds one, and let's solve it with a slightly better loop. So the second one, the print odds function, prints the odd numbers from 1 to the max. So I'm going to set up a counter. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to build the condition into the loop. So I want to say as long as the counter is less than or equal to the max, I'm going to repeat my process. So I don't have to manually break this loop now because the condition has been built into the loop itself. So the loop will know as soon as the counter is not less than or equal to the max that it shouldn't do it anymore. Check if odd and print if needed. Odd numbers are simply numbers that don't evenly divide into 2. So if you mod the counter by 2 and it's not 0, well, that's an odd number. So I'll print it. And then increment the counter. So the second one, a lot of us would consider this a slightly better approach because it just, for a lot of us, it makes more sense that you just sort of build the condition into the loop. Now the loop just checks for itself to see whether or not it can continue. In the first example, I had to manually check if the loop can continue and manually break the loop. In the second example, sorry, my voice gets roughed up after doing this for a few hours. In the second example, the loop does that check for me because I built the control into the loop. Save that. I'm going to go down here into main, and I'm going to call print odds. I'm going to use something, well, let's say 25 again. So it should print out 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, and 25. If I use 25 as a max, I'm going to go a little bit smaller just for fun this time. So 13. So it should be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. So there's the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. Just confirming that those are the odd numbers from 1 up to and including the maximum value I supplied, which was 13. Notice that the function doesn't care what the maximum is. The maximum is whatever the maximum is when you call it. So the function has to just work with whatever the maximum is. That's how I would solve those two problems. Okay, so the FizzBuzz problem, if you haven't done it, I'll put a link here so you can go read about the FizzBuzz problem. The urban legend about the FizzBuzz problem is that new programmers who are interviewing for a programming job would be asked to solve this problem, and it would be an immediate tell to the interviewers whether or not that person knew anything at all about programming. To a certain extent, by the way, being able to solve this problem would tell you whether or not someone knew anything about programming, because you have to be able to write a loop, you have to do some arithmetic, you have to do decision-making, if-else type things, and you have to do outputs in some programming language. To a certain extent, it actually is true that you have to know how to do a little bit of programming to solve this problem. But the urban legend part is that I've never heard of anybody who's been asked this problem. They're usually more difficult problems that they're asked than this. But what FizzBuzz is supposed to do is, it has 4 possible things it can do. So it will do, one thing it will do is that if a number is evenly divisible by 3, a multiple of 3, it will print fizz. If it's a multiple of 5, i.e. evenly divisible by 5, it will print buzz. If it is a multiple of 3 and a multiple of 5, it will print FizzBuzz. And if it's none of those things, if it's not a multiple of 3 and not a multiple of 5 and not a multiple of 3 and a multiple of 5, then it should just print the number. That's what FizzBuzz does. Now I'm going to do it slightly wrong so I can show you what usually catches people out when they first see this problem. And I'm going to use it with what a lot of us consider to be the best looping setup for this kind of a problem. So what most of us would do is we would set up our counter as a part of the loop in addition to the condition. I'll give you a template here. So this is how you write this kind of loop. The first section of this kind of loop is where you start the counter, so I want to start my counter at 1. The second part is the condition, so in this case, as long as the counter is less than or equal to the max. And then the last section is how you want to change or move the counter, which for us is simply counting up once at a time. So this, most of us, I think, with a little bit of experience would consider this the best looping setup to solve a counting problem. A problem where you have to count from something to something and then do some work while you're counting. I will put a note here that I call this, in our materials, a counting loop. So if you see references in my materials for our class to a counting loop, I'm talking about a loop with this setup, where you start the counter, you have the condition, and then you adjust the counter or change the counter as a part of the loop. The nice thing about this is that the processing part in the loop doesn't have to do anything about the counter or the condition. The processing part of the loop can only do the processing part. All right, so this is how most, at least in my experience, a lot of people end up writing this, and it's slightly wrong. So let me show you how most people end up writing this. So most people would say, so counter mod 3 being 0, that tells us that that is a multiple of 0. That's the fizz. Output. Then they would use an else if to check if it's a multiple of 5. That's the buzz output. Then they would check to see if it's both. So if it's an even multiple of 3 and it's an even multiple of 5, that's the full-on fizz buzz. And the other possibility that it was none of those things, in which case the fizz buzz problem says simply print out the counter. So this is how I see, it's a very common that people, this is their first attempt at this problem. So I'm going to run this, I'm going to go down to main and I'm going to call fizzbuzz, and I'm going to give it a maximum of 15. So the reason I'm choosing 15 here is because the one number in that range from 1 to 15 that is an even multiple of 3 and 5 is 15. So on 15, I should see fizzbuzz. I didn't save it. Okay, so here's the fizzbuzz section. So there's the multiple of, so 1's not any of those, so we see the 1, we see the 2. 3 correctly comes out as fizz. 5 correctly comes out as buzz. 6, which is a multiple of 3, correctly as fizz. 7 and 8 are correct. 9 is a multiple of 3, that's fizz. 10 is a multiple of 5, that's buzz. 12 is a multiple of 3. 13 and 14, and then 15 should have been fizz buzz. So people often puzzle over, why didn't it show fizz and buzz? And the answer to that question is that in this if-else-if setup, the first match wins. So the first thing that is a match wins. And for 15, that is a multiple of 3, which fires off the fizz section, and so it never allows it to even try fizzbuzz. So the real solution to this problem is to check for fizzbuzz first. Because if you don't do that, then somebody else wins. So let me get rid of that. Wait, I need the fizzbuzz printout. Nope. So the trick to this problem is to realize that you have to test the fizz-buzz condition first, because if you don't, then one of the other conditions catches. Now if I go run this again, then I correctly get fizz-buzz on 15 because that was checked first. You might, by the way, if you're clever about math, you might realize that anything that's evenly divisible by 3 and 5 at the same time could be more succinctly stated as to be evenly divisible by 15 instead. Same thing. So there's the fizz-buzz. The test I like to do if we were in lab together is I would put the value 31 in here, because that would show me two fizz-buzzes at 15 and 30, and then it should also print the 31 at the end. So here's the fizz-buzz at 30, here's the fizz-buzz at 15, and then here's the 31 at the end as it should appear. This is a relatively short lab. Most semesters this one takes, because everyone's new to this, it takes a little bit longer than it took me just now to do it. But you can probably review the video more efficiently than me purposely going through this slowly. So when you do, or if you do review this, I just want you to note that the looping setups I used on the three problems were different. So this first one, I would call this an okay way to solve this problem, where we're counting from 1 up. So I think of that as a counting problem. We're starting at 1 and we're counting up to some maximum and then doing something with the counter as we count. That's okay, and it works just fine, so there's nothing wrong with it. A slightly better approach that I used on print odds is to put the condition for continuing the loop, build that into the loop itself. So now I don't have to write an if statement to know when I need to break the loop. The loop knows when to break because I told it what condition to use to continue or not. So I'm telling the loop to continue as long as the counter is less than or equal to the maximum. So as soon as the counter is counted past the maximum, it will stop. And then what I think is the best approach to a counting problem is to put the counter and the condition all built into the loop itself. It's confusing looking at first, but what it allows you to do then is just focus on the problem that you're counting for in the loop, as opposed to also focusing on what do I do with the counter and when do I break the loop. All of that stuff is just built into the loop itself. So that's going to give me a short day. I can answer your questions. Let me put a note here. So today we did Lab 9. With 3 different for loop setups, and then I also want to tell you that next Wednesday, which will be April 8th, which is a little premature for some. Well, no, by then it won't be. Next Wednesday during the Q&A broadcast, this is by request. Someone asked me to hold on, I have to think for a second. By request. Someone asked me to show you on my Q&A broadcast next Wednesday how I might start Project 3. So I'm going to do that on Wednesday, and I will be using some of the things we talked about on the Tuesday next week to help me do that. So anyway, just a heads up, if you're interested in that, that's when I will first show a starter for Project 3, probably is next Wednesday. And that is everything I have. So that's a shorter one than normal because the lab was so small. Oh, I didn't do one thing. So let's finish the job. I also have a test file, so I downloaded the test file and I'm going to go test it. I passed the test, so that's additional confirmation that the program's working as expected. Okay, so I'm going to sit here quietly for a few minutes. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. If the audio is bad, I apologize. I hope that by Tuesday next week I will have a microphone I can pin to my shirt, and then I can I'll be further away from my laptop fan, and hopefully the audio will be slightly better. Okay. String slice. I'm also really confused on the last part. So original greetings. Updated greetings. Okay, so I'm gonna get some Lab 11 code and look at that. So one thing to be careful, I'm just gonna copy your code actually. And then I'll have to okay, so the challenge on this one is, all right, so the first part I think you've done correctly. Let me double check. This is Lab 11. String slice. Clear an array of 3 string name original pre-populate. Use the make function of the equal length. So one thing you can do, which is just sort of slightly more sophisticated, for this updated greetings, instead of hard coding this 3, you can make it to be the same length, the computed length of the original, which is a slightly sort of more sophisticated way to solve that problem. And it also means that if you were to change the size of your original greetings, you wouldn't have to change this line of code. So one thing to look for is opportunities to use the lengths of your arrays and slices where you can instead of numbers. But otherwise, you use the make correctly. It's a slice of string. It's the same length as the original greeting, so that's perfect. That's number 2. Number 3, use the %v. So this one's correct, line 5, and then use a range loop to overwrite each string and updated greetings with its use strings dot to upper. Okay, so this one's challenging. So one thing to note here, you cannot write a loop that does both arrays or both slices at the same time. You just can't do it. When you write a loop, you write it so that you range over one array or one slice. So you're going to range over the original greetings. What goes here is a singular item from what you range over. So since I am ranging over original greetings, I have to think what's one thing in original greetings, and one thing is just one greeting, right? So the original greetings has a whole bunch of greetings in it. As I'm ranging over it, I'm getting one greeting at a time. The other thing, though, is I actually, in this case, want this index. So this pair right here is the position and the element of each item in original greetings. So at position 0, when I is 0, the greeting will be morning. When I is 1, the greeting will be salutations. And when I is 2, the greeting will be evening. So those are the pairs that you're getting. So this line's close. I'm going to back it off a little bit just so we can focus. Let's get rid of this. Okay, so what are we doing as we're ranging over the original greetings? I want to take each greeting and uppercase it. Just the one greeting. I can only do one at a time. The whole point for writing this loop is to process that collection one item at a time. The loop allows me to move through it from beginning to end, but I'm only processing one thing at a time. So I'm going to process one greeting and its associated position at a time from all the original greetings. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to uppercase the greeting. Now the question then is, where do I put it? And where I want to put it is into the updated greetings slice. That's why we called it that. Now I'm not done, but the updated greetings will be where I take each greeting from the originals, uppercase them, and then store them into updated greetings. If I use this position here, then updated greetings at 0 will be the uppercase version of morning, and updated greetings at 1 will be the uppercase version of salutations, and updated greetings at 2 will be the uppercase version of evening. And then the last one, so after I'm done, oh, this is, by the way, this is the original greetings, I think, isn't it? No. Okay. After I'm done, then I look at the updated greetings again. Not in the loop, but after I've completed my processing work. What I should see here is that the original updated greetings is all empties, and the new updated greetings has all of the original greetings, but in their to upward form. Yeah, well, let's be careful about, you see how the ampersand there, what you plugged in, so make sure you can make that a percent sign. So right here. Otherwise, that looks correct now to me. I haven't tried it, but probably it's correct. Yes, that is correct. So the first time through it should look empty, more or less, and the second time, let me make a little program out of this and let's try it out. I'll show you what I see. There we go. Yeah, so the first one is, it's actually not empty. Technically it's 3 empty strings, so if you look in here, there's actually kind of 3 nothings. Because that's when you first make the slice of 3 elements, it's going to have basically 3 empty strings in it. So kind of you can see that those are there. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, it looks empty. And then when you come back after you've put some actual data in there, then it should look like that. Yeah, let's go. So, it's good to be ahead, and this is sort of weird times with our online meetings. So if you can keep yourself ahead like this, you're in great shape. As you know, it takes a while to get used to all this slice stuff. It looks really weird at first, so the sooner you get to sort of experiencing it and practicing it, the better, I think. Alright, so I'm about to put a last call message here in the chat. If you're gathering up for any other questions, please just let me know. I won't close the broadcast down, but if I do close the broadcast down before you got to ask your question, you can email me. That's okay. So everyone have a good weekend. We'll be back on Tuesday. So hopefully things go well for you between now and then. You find some downtime, exercise your bodies and your minds a little bit, whatever it is that makes you feel happy, and I will see you next week.